Hello and welcome. Today we've got Mark Z, and today we are going to be discussing about the currency revaluation, like the dinars, the dongs. So some of us call it the wealth transfer, and we're going to dive into conversations of why is it happening? What is it that it's happening? Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin, where you can follow all my daily newsreels. Mark, thank you so much for joining me. How are you, and what have you been up to?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to getting a chance to finally meet you, other than a hello in a chat room or something. Tickled to get to meet you. And why is it that I mean, is it if I just need the English accent, like you, Charlie, all these guys are so popular with that accent?
Well, guys, I love your American accents. Over here in the UK, we love your accents, and it's very popular to us as well. Your accent, that is. But yeah, I mean, I've been watching some of your stuff. You pop up on my news feed. People send me your videos as well, and it's very interesting because I've always been very interested with the currency revaluations because a lot of people in the truth communities are buying dinars, dongs, and other foreign currencies that are very weak, that are going to be, revalued because maybe of gold and minerals and resources. And they're going to give those countries and currencies purchasing power. So I want to explain to my viewers with you, what is it exactly? Why is it happening? And I also understand that a lot of people have been, waiting for this to happen for many, many years. We're talking maybe 20 to
Decades.
30 years, decades. Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit of history about this and then take us into, why is this happening or what's really going on?
History gets more interesting because you go through antiquity almost. You go to follow the Roman Empire. They started clipping coins. It became fiat. Then they realized they could write paper. And this goes not the Republic, but I'm going afterwards to the Empire. Most people don't realize the Roman Empire far outlasted the Roman Republic. Um, and then you have more examples every time, and Voltaire talks about it. Uh, Fiat currency always returns to its intrinsic value of zero.
Mhm.
So it's used as a way to tax us into oblivion or tax the poor, and then they do paper and they create a asset that's based on debt, and that it implodes. It goes back to commodities, and then once we all get comfortable, they hijack the system. They do it again. After Rome, we saw Spain rise. Spain do the same thing, collapse. We saw England, the UK during the colonial days do similar, the same thing. They were the default currency around the world. Then it went to paper credit or lines of credit on the accounts, old school written stuff. And then the same thing happened: wash, rinse, repeat. A lot of us call it Nasera Jacera, but it's all about resetting back to the commodities. And we do it. Everybody's got a cool name for it. But in order to move back into commodity based, asset based, you have to kind of wipe the books. It's something that's happened throughout human history. So we would like to think we're all cool and neat, and we are. It's like watching the fall of the Roman Empire with the internet, with TikTok. Same idea. We're watching the same great wealth transfer occur. Just this time, we have computers and quantum systems, or QFS, or whatever you guys want to call it, for that transfer.
So has it ever happened in history before where there's been a reset in history? Because I've heard maybe a a good few hundred years ago, or there's been something like this.
Yes, but it was more regional then. We weren't quite as globalized. I mean, you can go back further to what did they call them? The sea people. You can go back to like throughout the Mediterranean, etc. We're talking thousands of years, and we saw similar things before it all crashed and fell. Now, instead of it just being what they thought was the world, the Roman Empire, the Mongolian Empire, and all these, when they collapse, it truly is the whole world. Well, maybe minus Antarctica and anybody living in inner Earth. If I don't know if you've ever done shows on those; those are always fascinating.
So a lot of people, I mean, you can really spend peanuts on buying a million dinar or a million dongs. It's really peanuts when you buy it, in dollars or pounds even. Now, and a lot of people in this community are believing there's going to be a reset. And when it resets, it's going to go level playing field with the dollar, which means if you've got a million dinar or a million dongs, you're going to have $1 million, or maybe just a little bit more, because like what we've seen with the Kuwait dinar, that has revalued, and it's much more than the dollar. So tell us what is really going on there? Why is this happening?
It As soon as the fiat world and the debt becomes untenable, then they have to move back to commodities. They have to have something to weigh and measure. So they are kind of like when you go through a bankruptcy, you clean slates and you start from scratch. They have to clean the slates and start from scratch. So the nations that we're talking about with currencies, they have a lot of assets. They have a lot of assets. They have a lot of commodities. Maybe it's gold, maybe it's oil, maybe it's lithium, maybe it's whatever. That's going to be worth a lot of dollars. Or excuse me, I should say a lot of wealth. Dollars may not be the benchmark we use anymore going forward. May have a cool new name. Maybe it's a dinar again. Maybe it's, I don't know, a pound. Pick one, a shilling, a peso. So we have to have a different measure of value. So we've invested in these countries that are heavy in commodities but undervalued in their currencies. I look at it as the same thing as if you and I bought a bunch of silver, gold, maybe we bought uranium and food. We're counting on those things always having value, no matter what happens to the currency, the countries, the borders, whatever. These things are always going to have value. So, what we've done by investing in the currency, people may not understand what they're doing. They may just be thinking white hat or some magical person there that suddenly tells them they're worth a lot of money. What we're doing is far more fundamental than that, even if they don't realize it. They're buying these currencies, and it's kind of a way of like playing, of leveraging your money because now you're investing in those currencies where they have all those assets. It's a similar idea to buying a bunch of silver, a bunch of gold, tons and tons of grain and sitting on it until the value goes up. That's in effect what we've done if you break it down to the mechanics and the fundamentals. Most people just don't look at it that way. From a historic perspective, you are very smart, level, nuts and bolts fundamental investors by purchasing the currencies from countries that are heavy in assets.
Right. Okay. So why are these currencies like the Vietnamese dong and the Iraqi dinars, the Venezuelan and the Iranian Iral, I believe it is. Have they always been so undervalued?
They haven't always been undervalued. Some of it, well, I mean, Vietnam and Iraq are unique because of war. They got devalued because of war and have yet to be revalued up to their former. So they took something that was worth this much money, came in and said, nope, it's only worth this much money, and pegged it to that value, even though it should have been up here all along, but it wasn't. So it's fighting the market. It wants to go in the direction it deserves to be. Our own State Department has said over and over that Vietnam needs to raise the value of their currency, but they have continued to keep it low because they're a communist controlled country and they can artificially manipulate it to increase their um, exports so that they can import money, export goods, and hold wealth in the country. And it's been pretty successful for them if you get down to the nuts and bolts and the wealth that they've created over the last 2 decades or so.
Would you
So they've
say
been
that
manipulating down.
would you say that the wars that happened, in Iraq, do you think that has a lot to do with keeping their currencies very undervalued to keep them poor? Maybe because Iraq has a lot of value in their country, like minerals and resources?
You mean kind of like the 20, 30, 40, the trillions of dollars in assets that they've now admitted to are in Ukraine. And now it's a strategic need for us to control Ukraine and keep it from Russia because it's sitting on all these mineral wealth that we didn't know about before, that we somehow didn't know, even though the CIA was there, or kind of like, I don't know, Libya, where Gaddafi proposes a gold backed standard and he disappears, or Brazil that tried to, I mean, excuse me, Venezuela that tried to do something similar. And then the sanctions started. Hey, we can go on this one. But no, I definitely think we've done that. It was so successful in Kuwait that we decided to do it again in Iraq. This is my opinion. We created a war for fun because we wanted to hijack the nation's wealth and control it, similar to what we've done in the Ukraine, similar to what we did in much of Northern Africa over the years. And people don't realize there, I mean, that one, boy, that one's a really rough one, as the whole world's been raping the African continent for assets and resources for hundreds of years.
For sure. Now, what's going to now? If the fiat currency is a big scam, right, and it has no value, and it's backed by interest and debt and thin air, and they just keep printing and printing, then what's going to happen when it collapses? Is it going to collapse? Are we going to go back to gold? And if you know anything about BRICS nations implementing the gold standard, if you could tell us a little bit around that as well, please.
BRICS going as heavy as they can on the commodity side, partially based in gold. You can look at the Chinese, the yuan, the renminbi, whatever you guys want to call it. They did a gold backed version just for oil sales around the world to get acceptance. But inside their own country, it's still just fiat. Internationally, they're covering it, pegging it fractionally to gold. These countries are doing the exact same thing, pegging it to a commodity so that it has value. You don't have to question whether it has value. You can see how wildly successful that has been now for Zimbabwe with the ZIG, the ZIG. You can see how popular it has been in Russia with the ruble by doing a partial peg to gold. Even with all the sanctions, second round of sanctions, the ruble is outperforming the U.S. dollar and gaining on it. It's been a lovely time to watch the Austrian economists finally get a big win.
Interesting. So do you think we'll ever get to a point where the Federal Reserve is going to implode? We're going to have a reset, and they're going to wipe out all the debt that we
No,
have.
it's inevitable.
Let's go into that a little bit. Like, explain to me the reasons why that would happen, and let's walk me through the process of that.
You set the stage for it when you were talking about it. The debt base, they just keep printing more. It's what it's worth is only what we think it's worth right now. It's the market controlling it. As long as we're willing to keep playing the game, they've been able to get away with it. As soon as the people are like, yeah, I'm not willing to play the game. Of course, before we never had an alternative. We didn't have a BRICS. All we had was the SWIFT system after Bretton Woods. And we didn't have a choice. If we wanted to move money, if we wanted to, say you're in South Carolina and you want to send some money to your relative in Virginia or across the pond to your buddy Nick, you needed to have a system that could move the money. And there was only one. So they controlled everything. They were the only game in town. Now you have multiple games in town. You have cryptocurrencies, blockchain, you have Enbridge, you have SIPs, you have other ways to move money safely, quickly, efficiently around the world. This is something that we did not have before in this journey. So they were able to artificially kick the can further and further down the road. But now we have options. The question is when do people finally wake up and say, I've lost 25% on my money in the last 3 years since Joe Biden became president. It's becoming worthless. The Weimar Republic starts hitting at some point, and you're like, nope, that's it. I'm going to start doing everything in silver. I'm going to buy silver. I'm going to buy gold. I'm going to put my money in Glint, any of those other companies, and ignore it. And that's when it collapses. Once they lose, the public loses its faith in the US dollar. That's when it implodes. The question is, when is that? It should have been in 2019 or perhaps before. It should have been last year when you started seeing banks collapsing here in the US. I mean, my God, you guys have banks closing, collapsing, and going under left and right in Europe. And it never makes the news here. I mean, you'd have to search for it. You'd have to be somebody, you'd have to be watching me. You'd have to be watching you, Charlie, somebody like that to even know what is going on around the world. US, we just don't talk about it. We just pretend. We're a bunch of ostriches over here.
When I tell people that, the Federal Reserve we're going to have a reset because it's a fraudulent system, and they're going to be caught out. Somebody like Trump is going to come in. He's going to put everything on the gold standard. And because of fraudulent activities under the fiat currency Federal Reserve system, all of the contracts that were created, like mortgages, credit card loans, everything will be wiped out because of illegal activities. And when I tell people this, they think, nah, that's not going to happen. It sounds too good to be true. And I says to them, if you were to tell the last generation of the black slaves that they were going to be freed, they wouldn't believe it. It's too good to be true. You tell
That's a great
someone,
example.
yeah, you just tell someone in, just a few years ago, 5, 6 years ago, the whole world is gonna go into lockdown, right? They would not believe you. They'll think you're just a mad, crazy person. But now I start to think anything is possible. You know, so how close do you think we are to having this debt wiped out and everybody's starting again from scratch?
Well, one, you probably are mad and crazy. You just happen to be correct in this one. We are, if I have to make a guess, and I would, I would pretty much bet, any dollar or penny I have that we get it in 2024. This is it. We're in the skinny of this thing, and we see things now. If you would ask me that question 5 years ago, oh, we're close. We had never had this much accomplished. We never had an alternative system. We never had alternative payments. We never had this many people awake. Think about you, Nick. When you first started doing podcast interviews, how many people watch you listen? How many people are out there? Most of them probably thought you were nuts. Now there's millions and millions and millions of people that are awake and listening. The whole world is very, very different than I know you've been at it a number of years than when we all started screaming from our soapboxes on the sidewalks, trying to tell people, wake them up.
Yeah, we have been. So excuse me. So how far? I mean, so you're saying that all the mortgages, so people have a house, say they have a mortgage, and they owe 200,000 on their mortgage. So that debt is just going to be wiped out, and they're going to own that property outright. Is that your definition of the reset?
That is probably in a very simplistic terms. Yes,
Because
we look at
we owe the money to the bank. We borrowed the money from the bank. The bank has acted fraudulently. So they are the ones that lose, and we keep the goods because that's how it would work in a court of law, right?
exactly. But now think about it. They loaned us the money, did they? They never had the money. They just created it out of thin air when we agreed to pay it. It became our debt. They didn't actually have the money. They fractionally created it. At most, they had 2% of it at most. So I mean, from a legal perspective, maybe they could come back and say, okay, you owe me 2%. From a legal perspective, they never had it. It was fraudulent from the beginning. And how do we see this? What do we base this on historically? Those same debts were canceled throughout history every time there was a reset. More modern for you folks that are saying, oh my God, this could never happen. I mean, it's such a foreign idea. Do they remember Iceland? The people kept their houses, kept their whatever. The bankers lost it. They jailed the bankers and they reset their system. Not a whole world system, just Iceland. But that's how it worked.
So you're
They,
saying
if
that
they had
this
bought a
you're
TV
saying
with a credit card, they still had the TV.
so you're saying that this already happened in one country, but you're saying now that this is going to happen global. Like we've come to the point of drain the swamp. They're really scared of Trump. They know that their days are numbered, and this is going to go global. But it's already happened in a country called Iceland.
Yeah, it happened in Iceland years ago, and my suspicion, and I very much believe it is, it's going to happen in Iceland again. Iceland, they did their thing. They went after the bankers. Greece almost did the same thing, and the European Union came in. Whoa, we don't want other countries getting the idea. I can tell you, the bankers all over the world, big bankers, central bankers, were terrified when Greece started to collapse after Iceland had a reset. Because at that point, I really thought this is it. All right, if Greece does this, the dominoes have fallen. We're going to see this rip throughout Turkey, the Baltic states. Then we're going to see some Asian states. I was really expecting to flow from there because we don't know when that last straw hits the camel's back and it breaks.
For me, I think the biggest things that is going to make a very huge difference to your Tom, Dick, and Harrys, to everyone, to we the people, the victims that have been victimized by the deep state, and they've been making us suffer, paying loads of taxes, and now for me, it's the debt being wiped out, like what happened in Iceland, and also the currency revaluations of foreign currencies because you can buy them for peanuts. And A lot of people have been asking where they can buy them. I will leave a link below so that you can learn more information about those currencies. So let's talk about currencies with the Vietnamese dong and the dinars. Where do you see what's the latest updates that we have now about those, and how close are we to that? You mentioned also. I know I'm asking you a few questions. I do apologize. Actually, let's go with those.
Yeah, where do we start on that? When? I mean, nobody knows the exact timing. We're guessing at it based on what we're seeing. I mean, I can tell you what bankers are saying. I can tell you what some of my folks that have historic bonds. I can tell you what a lot of those folks are hearing. I can tell you what I'm hearing from people that work either as contractors in Iraq, work within finance or different banks there, and the overwhelming majority think we are somewhere at the latest this fall, but most likely somewhere between now and early July. We're seeing updates to banking machines. We've had President of Iraq, Soudani, come out a number of times recently and say that they are getting ready to adjust the value up. Heck, he even said it's going to be the father of the U.S. dollar. It's going to be the greatest currency in the world. Well, actually, he didn't say that. He said it's going to reinstate to the premier status it had, which meant it was the most valuable currency in the world. I mean, they've been telling us over and over that this is going to happen. The question is when is this going to happen? But they're positioned, they're ready. I've never seen them this ready. Soudani came out and said the central bank is now in charge. They can pull the trigger when they want to. I wish I could tell you and give you hope and say it's exactly this day. I can't.
I'm not
Um,
honestly. I'm not bothered because I know it's going to happen. We just don't know when. But at least I know we're going in the right direction. But
yeah,
I do hope it's very soon, though. you know.
Do you have currency?
I do. I have a bit of everything. I have a bit of silver. I have a bit of gold, dinars, Iranian Iral. I have dongs. I have a bit of crypto. You have to have a bit of. You have to. My mum always told me when I was a child, you have to have your eggs in different baskets. You know, and so one of the things that you said. I mean, when you say it could happen in June or July, I would assume that this kind of thing, this should happen under Trump, shouldn't it? So that Trump could get the credit.
A lot of folks believe that. And in the grand scope of the world, in the grand scope of history, it's not that important for one person to get the credit. A system's bigger than one person. That being said, do I think they're going to let Joe Biden have credit or Macron have credit or any of these folks? No, I don't. But I was always told Nasera was no matter who was in office in these countries, they were going to have to step down while new elections were held. And that's assuming Nasera is real. And folks, don't panic if it's not, because anytime we have seen a reset of a currency from fiat to assets, they have canceled debt. What is the most important thing to most you folks personally with Nasir Jasser? It's the cancellation of that debt. It's getting under that burden. So history tells us you're still getting that part. The question is whether or not we're still going to have some of these crappy world leaders, and we're going to have to get out there and actually get involved and show up to change who's in charge.
Interesting. So when that happens, and say somebody doesn't have a property, can they? Where would they go if the banks have folded in? Where do they go and borrow money to buy a property?
I hope they would come to other people that did have currencies to help do it. But when you do go back to asset backed money, we should see the cost of everything come down considerably and drastically. People around the world do not realize that real estate is massively overinflated because it has been used for the fractional system. They loan the money on it, they fractionalize it so they can loan more money. You put $1,000 in the bank, now they can cut a loan for 10,000. You do a home improvement now, that loan, because it's a negative for you and an asset for them, they can fractionalize it. Now that's $200,000, and it goes over and over and over. So they have overinflated real estate values to prop up their banking system. So when you pull that out, it's no longer debt based. Your real estate comes down exponentially. For many people out there, will not need to borrow. They will just have to be more disciplined. They'll have to buy the property, wait a few months, start construction. A lot of this will be like it was in the past. You didn't have to get a mortgage to do a house. Or if you did, it was a much smaller mortgage. I don't know about you guys in the UK, but here in the US, the average mortgage is now for the average family is over 50% of their income is just housing. We're not even getting into power, groceries, education, health insurance.
How about property tax? You pay it off and you still have to pay the tax, the 2%. I mean, what's the point of getting a mortgage when you have to pay the rent to the government? I
Yeah.
mean, we don't have that in the UK. Here we have a flat tax, a 2 to 3% roughly. And when you buy the house, you pay that 3% of the value of the property, and you never ever hear about it again. You just pay for your water, your council tax maybe, which is for the police and your bins and the local community. But that's like $100 a 150 pounds a month, which is, and that more or less stays the same, But when when you're paying 3% of the value of the property every year, and then your property value goes up, and you've got to pay the 2% of the new revaluation of the property, even though you haven't sold it, it's they're thieving from you. How is that even sustainable?
It's
And you still got to pay it even if you work hard and you pay off your property. You still got to pay the 2% rent to the government.
I think you just nailed it. How's that sustainable? It's not sustainable. We have people right now in the US, we have record numbers. We've not seen this even from our Great Depression. We didn't see this in the crash of 2007 8. We didn't see this during COVID. We have a record number of people losing their homes that are paid for because they can't afford the property taxes. We have seniors, we have veterans, your grandmothers, your abuelos, your, grandma. We have them all losing their homes, disabled people losing their homes because they can't afford the renter's tax, which is particularly offensive. We have people going to jail because for debtors' prisons. And then we look at the founding of our country, and one of the major tenets is because and our founding father said that we would never become a debtor's nation. That's exactly what we became. Almost any nation, as they get older, you'll see that. You'll see they'll start to clip the coins. You'll see them go to fiat. You'll see laws for you, not laws for me. So you'll see a warping the judicial system, and then you will see a enormous dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots, and then boom, it hits an untenable situation, or like you said, sustainable is unsustainable, and then the implosion happens. Question is do we do it the right way, nice and peacefully, or do we have to grab our pitchforks and torches?
I mean, I call this financial abuse. It's very dark and evil agenda that they have. It's terrible. I don't understand. When I tell people, the UK folks over here, how the property taxes work in the United States, honestly, they jaw drop. Their jaw drops. They cannot believe it. And then they're like, they're living in slavery. And I'm like, I know. And they don't know about it. They're immune to the idea. They think this is life. But no, we
They
don't
told
have
us
that.
No, they told us we're the freest nation in the world, and they lied to us.
They have.
We're not the freest nation in the world. We used to be the freest nation in the world, but that is not what we are now. We're free range slaves. But instead of needing to put a shackle on us, they just give us debt. Debt now becomes the taskmaster and the slave, and they send us off. They market to us. They ramp things up. Now, you go to other country. How much is your cell service per month for how many quid, how many pound, how many dollars, if you did the math, for you to have a cell phone with unlimited internet? Just curious, what's your cost?
Well, if I do SIM only, because I like to buy a nice iPhone cash, and then I do SIM only, so I get unlimited texts, messages, and 100 gigabytes of data. I pay about £15 a month, which is about 19
20 bucks.
dollars. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want unlimited here, but it's going to be unlimited, not 100 gigs. It's unlimited, but you're going to spend on average, if you've got a bargain, $60. If you only have one phone on, it's usually close to $100 for that unlimited on average here. Your home internet service, if you get top notch internet, it's at least $100, and
No,
that's not even getting television.
I get fiber optic, Virgin, Richard Branson's. I don't endorse Richard Branson, but Virgin is very reliable when it comes to internet. And I get the fiber optic one, and I get unlimited, right? And it's super fast. I don't pay more than £30 a month.
Yeah, even here in Puerto Rico, where I am, which is part of the United States, for those that haven't figured that part out, the capital has a American flag flying over it, along with a Puerto Rican flag. It's still 90 some bucks
Mm.
for that same fiber optic that you get. I mean, it's awesome. It's better than most fiber optic in the stateside, but yeah, it's expensive.
I was in Miami Brickell and I went into Publix and I just wanted a regular shower gel, and it was a large, like a largish shower gel, and it costs $8 to $10. In the UK, how much is that where you are in the States? What's the average? Maybe Brickell, Miami is a bit expensive, but what is an
Hey,
average large shower gel for you?
yeah, honestly, because of the big box stores or wherever, it's pretty similar no matter
Yeah.
where you're at. The
So
only real
in
difference you're going to see is going to be when you go out to a restaurant, it'll be more expensive in those areas, and housing is going to be a lot more expensive. Other than that, it's pretty even with your goods.
in the UK, £1 60 for a large shower gel.
Wow.
And this isn't for a bad. I get the Radox or the Radox one, and that's a
Mhm.
decent. It's a decent shower gel. It's not your cheapest one, and it's not the very most expensive one. But I like the smell, and I get the blue one, Radox, and it's £1 60 for a super large one. It's crazy. I mean, I was shocked by American prices, and I'm very sensitive to your pain, to all of you.
Yeah, that's one of those things I have come to realize as being exposed to folks like you, folks in Australia, traveling. I was recently in Brazil with Charlie Ward. There, you can get an enormous. I'm talking about a great steak dinner with a with a like a big beer or water or whatever to go with it. You're talking $10, high quality food.
No.
You're talking about $10 for your phone service, $20 if you want it unlimited, and you travel in much of the rest of the world, and you realize just the burden we have been supporting so that we can send our money all over the rest of the world and arm everybody but our own citizens. It's sick and twisted.
I'm not being rude, but even here in Europe, the food is much more. It goes straight through you. When I go and have boiled eggs or
Mhm.
avocados, I go for the healthy option, chicken. I feel inflamed. I'm like, what are they injecting in this food? Like this, there's poisonous and chemicals that are in there that are not even supposed to be in my body, and I feel inflamed. I feel bloated. Even when I go for a coffee, God knows what they're putting in that milk. But here, I come here, my diet stays the same. I come back to the UK, my diet stays the same, and I lose weight.
Yeah. So wait, where are you now? Are you stateside?
I'm in London right now.
You're in London right now. Yeah, I noticed the same thing when I was eating the food in other countries, whether it was Panama, whether it was Brazil, whether it was other countries. The food quality was exceptionally better. It wasn't packaged as nicely. They didn't have quite as many processed options. The fruits and vegetables didn't have dyes and whatever, so they didn't quite look as visually appealing, but the flavor was much better.
Yeah.
But no, that's well, I tell you, I think you nailed it dead on with our food supply.
It needs to change. Biden has the left want to, they want to poison us. They want to make everything expensive. They want to raise your taxes. They want to bury us in regulations. They want to tax you on your electric car. It's just these people. We pay them so that they could make our lives easier, and it's just a terrible thing. I want to go back to the currencies. So with the Vietnamese dong and the Iraqi dinar, what rates would are you getting information wise? What do you think they would revalue to?
Yeah, I've said nearly from the beginning that I expected the dinar to be somewhere around 3.90 $4. I expected the Vietnamese dong to be somewhere two and a quarter. But what we're seeing here lately is more like five or over. Now these are I'm going to give you conservative because I hope more, but I hope some of these reports out there 10, 20, 30, all these things are correct. I would rather be pleasantly surprised than disappointed though. So I mean, I'm seeing and hearing rates from my banking contacts of 540 somewhere in there for the dinar, and over $3 or close to it now on the Vietnamese dong. I'm hearing about $1.20 or so for Indonesian rupiah. The real all over the board. I don't know what to expect. Bolivar all over the board. Don't know what to expect pricing wise.
It's peanuts buying the Vietnamese dong or the Iraqi dinar, and it's peanuts
Peanuts.
buying a million, for an example, and you could sell it back when it revalues, and you get that money back, $2-3 for one Vietnamese dong, for an example. That is a lot of money, and that's what we call the wealth transfer. And they want to stop this now. So how about the notes, the paper notes? What's going to happen with those? Because what if they change the notes?
Oh, they will change the notes after you exchange them. You'll exchange them, then they're not, because the value goes up. They're going to need smaller notes. You're just going to put in the bank, or if you wanted to trade them in, you'd have to walk out with stacks and stacks of the other ones. If you take in a 25K note, you're going to have to walk out with what, 1,025 notes to have the same thing in Iraq. So we've seen this before. We saw it in Kuwait. And Kuwait did a two-step. First, they devalued their currency after Iraq went into Kuwait. Uh, but then the Iraqi army stole so many. I mean, they literally went into the banks, took the stacks of cash, went in the store, took the stacks of cash. So Kuwait changed the currency before they revalued it. It had even devalued. They printed an entirely new one based on the same value of the one they had in circulation, so they could get rid of the bills that had gone to nefarious areas throughout Iraq, Iran, the theater. So then when they revalued, there wasn't as much in circulation. Iraq did something very similar. They did that, and they got rid of all the Saddam era notes. So they've done that. Same thing happened in Germany after World War II, where they reprinted a German mark before they would revalue. So we've already seen that happen. Vietnam has reprinted 2 or 3 times since they devalued in the 60s.
But if they change the purchasing power of their currencies and it revalues, how will I know that they will accept the current notes that I have?
If they don't, then they have screwed all the people in their country, their international contacts on an international level. Now, if they have no international trade at all, I could see a country doing that, but it would have to be something really small. It'd have to be like a Tanzania. It'd have to be something really small that doesn't have any foreign deposits, et cetera, or the rest of the world would never do business with them.
Mhm.
You take a country that is as global as Iraq, they're selling oil all around the world. There are Iraqi nationals all over the world that left or fled during all the conflict there. You're suddenly going to tell all these people, all these central banks that hold their currency, that their currency is now useless. You can tell the US at one time had like 50, 55 trillion dinar, that all the money in their foreign currency reserves are useless. You're going to tell the people in Vietnam that hold the central bank that holds it all, it's going to be useless. It's not going to happen that way. You can't do it on a global scale, or these countries would never be invited to the table globally. They wouldn't be able to sit down in regional meetings. They would never be a player. And history has told us it's just not the way it works.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to leave a link below for more information in regards to foreign currency. But Mark Z, it's been an absolute honor to have you on my show. Thank you very, very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Um, just remember, people go into politics for 2 reasons: either to punish their enemies or reward their friends, and get paid for doing just that. So try not to pay attention to your politicians. Pay attention to the fundamentals and the people around you. Don't let them convince you that you hate everybody from Palestine or everybody from Israel or everybody from Russia or China or whatever. Just remember, the average person out there is just trying to make a better life for them and their family. They're trying to pit us against each other. And I just want a constant reminder out there that lead with love and understanding.
Thank you very much, Mark. And we'll speak again very soon. You take care and God bless you. Bye bye.
Thanks, Nick.